everybody. Hi, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Welcome to Stories from the Forest, Stories from the Heart. If you didn't come here for this event, great. I'm so happy to have you. This is going to be sort of a Moth-esque storytelling night. The Moth is a podcast, the Moth Storytelling Hour. Maybe you've heard of it, but we're just going to tell some stories about the forest. And this is also an open mic, so if you want to do open mic, there's sign-ups right here with Michaela. Sign up for open mic. So, my name is Michelle Phillips. I'm completing my undergraduate education at UVM this semester. I'm an environmental studies major and English minor. And one of the classes that I'm taking this semester is called Climate, Forest, and Community. And we're studying the intersection of these three things all over the world. So we've studied, forest fires in Brazil that are driven by soya bean production. We've studied forest fire in Indonesia driven by palm oil production. We've studied forest fire in California. We've studied biomass. So we've been all over the world, but the place that's really hit home for me and the place that I've been really interested in studying is Vermont, right here in the Northeast United States. That's where we are right now, a place that is probably close to a lot of our hearts. So about somewhere between 11 and 12,000 years ago, the Champlain Sea was replaced by Lake Champlain. Ice sheets receded, and Vermont started to look like what we see today, that's mostly forested area. This land has been home to the Western Abenaki people for about that long as well. Since 1791, it's been called Vermont by a lot of people. Prior to the 1760s, it was estimated that 90% of Vermont was pristine forest. But between this time and the early 20th century, it's estimated that 70% of Vermont was deforested or clear-cut, primarily for agriculture. Today, 78% of Vermont is forested once again, which is pretty cool, I think. So human-driven climate change is impacting this place in a number of ways. I mean, besides the deforestation that we've seen here over the past 200 years or so. The increase in average temperature over the world is very present here. Forest composition in Vermont is shifting. A lot of maple, beech, birch species are decreasing and being replaced by oak and pine species of trees. A lot of plants are blooming earlier. Spring is coming earlier, whether it seems like it or not this year. The general trend over the past few decades has been earlier springs, and that means birds migrate earlier, deer populations are increasing. So there's a lot of changes that are happening. Maybe some of you have heard of the emerald ash borer. It's a pretty infamous little green beetle that feeds on ash trees, and it turned up in Orange County for the first time last month. So people are concerned about ash populations because of that. And so learning about all of these things, knowing all of this information makes me wonder, why do we care? What does climate change really look like for us? What does it look like for me in my life? And what does it look like for all of you? So that's why I've brought everybody together today to talk about, what we love about Vermont forests. How do we depend on them? If these changes are happening, why are we concerned? And I haven't been here that long. I've been here for 3 years while I was studying at UVM. I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but I wanted to use this night as an opportunity to say thank you to Vermont, thank you to its natural species and to its people, and I was hoping to use this night to raise the voices of people in my community like you, and hopefully raise the voice of the forest through all of you. So, I want to thank, just before we start, I want to thank Finn Yarborough, who is my media mentor who's filming tonight. I want to thank Cecilia Danks, who's my professor who gave me this assignment. And I want to thank Skinny Pancake for hosting this night. So, now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my first storyteller. His name is Professor Bill Keeton. He is a professor of forest ecology and forestry at UVM and also serves as a fellow at the Gund Institute for the Environment. He spent his early days tromping through the woods of the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, becoming a lifelong forest enthusiast. He has studied old-growth forests all over the world and is currently chairing the working group on old-growth forests and reserves for the International Union of Forest Research Organizations. And if that doesn't make him sound cool enough for you, then you should know that he's also a fan of Rubble Bucket, I'm pretty sure. And Rubble Bucket's one of my favorite bands. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's a really cool band. You should check it out. Bill's a fan, so he's a pretty cool guy. So let's all welcome Bill Keeton to the stage.
Thanks very much, Michelle. It's great to be here tonight, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit of a story. It's going to kind of meander around the world a bit, but it's going to find its way back to Vermont in the end, so you just got to bear with me a little bit. So on my very first trip to Ukraine in Eastern Europe about 15 years ago, I thought it'd probably be a good idea to know a few expressions in the Ukrainian language, so I could communicate with my colleagues at the university there and some of the forest rangers and environmentalists that I was working in. And I was over there for a research expedition to search for old-growth beech forests in the Carpathian Mountains, which are in the extreme western portion of that country. And so I looked up some expressions in my phrase book, and of course the first one that jumped out at me was how to say, "How are you?" in Ukrainian, which in Ukrainian is "Jak sprawy." So I thought, okay, great, I can go over to Ukraine and I can say, "How are you?" to my friends and my colleagues. And I was really mystified for a long time why every time I would say this expression to people, I would get blank expressions, or they would look uncomfortable, they would shuffle their feet a little bit. I kept trying the expression in different ways, with different emphases. Jak sprawy, jak sprawy. And still the same thing, blank expressions. Several trips later, and now back in the United States, I stumbled across this YouTube channel of 10 top things not to do when you're in Ukraine. So one of them was don't shake hands across a threshold, like at a doorway, it brings bad luck. Don't roll down the windows of a car, the draft will give you cold. Number 3, don't say, "How are you?" to people. Now in American English, we use that expression to basically mean hi, how are you, hello. You know, the common response is good, how are you, good. And you know, that's where the conversation ends. Maybe in extreme situations, you might say something about the weather, like, I'm good, weather really sucks, yeah, it really does. You know, but that's it. But I learned that in Ukraine, when you say "Jak sprawy," how are you? It really means, how are you? Like, how is your inner soul? And you have to be prepared for a long explanation. You know, like, oh, I've been sick for the last month, my parents aren't very good, I don't know how my kids are going to go to college, I just visited my parents last weekend. And so it means something completely different. And so, you know, this was my first cultural introduction to that country, and it wasn't as successful as I was hoping. It was a bit awkward, but the research turned out to be remarkably successful. And in the process of several trips there, we collected data from their magnificent old-growth forests in the Carpathian Mountains, and we showed that these forests were storing tremendous amounts of carbon, that if these forests were cut, would flux to the atmosphere and would be in the air as a greenhouse gas affecting our climate. And so from there, my colleagues and I assembled a database from more than 500 old-growth temperate forests around the world. Same thing, we showed that universally these forests are storing exceptional quantities of carbon that otherwise would be in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. And they provide numerous other values to nature, to society. They harbor exceptional biodiversity and habitats for wildlife. They provide remarkably clean water. They regulate the hydrological cycle. So they provide all these services for humanity globally. And I was fascinated by this, and that led to a series of additional studies. So later, next, I had the chance to go to Chile and Patagonia, where I've been working most recently. Same thing, incredible quantities of carbon that these forests are storing. And the forests in Patagonia are a little bit different. The winds come off of the South Pacific there, and they hit the Andes, and they rise up over the mountains. And as they're rising up, they shed the moisture that they've been carrying. They drop their precipitation. And this gives rise to the coastal rainforests of Patagonia. It's a remarkable phenomenon, and it only occurs in a handful of other places around the world, the Pacific Northwest, Southeast Alaska, a few other places. But the trees there are gnarled and stunted in some ways by these winds. Actually, I shouldn't say stunted, because some of these trees reach colossal heights. Enormous trees, but their crowns are gnarled and twisted by the winds. They look almost like tufula trees in Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. And the understories are incredible. There are these dense thickets of native bamboo and other species that are almost impenetrable. And one time a year ago, working on the plot that I like to refer to as the plot from hell, some of the toughest field conditions I've ever worked in anywhere in the world, I became so entangled in this undergrowth that my body was literally trapped and I could not move. The only way I could get out of there was by just throwing my body forward so that I would crash through the vegetation and could escape. But the thing that you don't often hear about Patagonia, you don't see it in the tourist marketing or on the web or in the films, is that more than 2/3 of the forests in Patagonia and Chile were burned down in the 1960s and 70s by fires that were lit by the campesinos coming in after World War II to settle that region of the world. And they left these fires burning uncontrolled literally for years. Sometimes these fires would go below ground into the root systems of these huge old ancient trees, and they would smolder in the soil literally for years and then flare up again years later. And this gave rise to fires that literally lasted for decades and burned over vast regions of the countryside there. And so if you drive through Patagonia today, you see the relics of this literally everywhere. You see the charred remains of these ancient old-growth trees littering the landscape, almost like dinosaur bones or the skeletons of dragons or something like that. And it's this constant reminder of how pervasive human impacts are. Literally in even the remotest corners of the world, you find this signal of human presence and impact. And that brings me back home when I return to Vermont and to the forests across the lake in the Adirondacks, where I also do a lot of work. And it reminds me that those impacts are pervasive here as well. And as Michelle said, we ecologists see them every day. We see our forests changing. We see species from the south moving north. We see forests shifting elevationally. We see exotic insects and pathogens like emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle and hemlock woolly adelgid fundamentally changing our forests. And we have to be concerned about this future forest that we have here. What will that look like? What will it be? And yet, I'm not willing to give up hope. I'm not willing to throw up my arms and admit defeat. That, for instance, we'll never have old-growth forests here again. As Michelle said, all of our forests were cleared in the 18th and 19th centuries. Everything that we have here has regenerated just since then. It's all a young secondary forest landscape. Some people say, you can never go back to old growth. We can never bring that back here. It's gone. It's a thing of the past. We have to just think of the future. But I'm not willing to accept that entirely. I think that old growth can have a place again on the Vermont landscape, on the New England landscape. And I'll tell you that for the last 20 years, I've had an experiment up on the side of Mount Mansfield and at the Jericho Research Forest, where we've been testing ways of carefully tending forests and nurturing them along towards that old growth condition that they once had. And it's working. We're seeing these forests take on those characteristics of old, complex, biologically rich forests. At the same time that that's happening, they're sequestering large amounts of carbon, which they're now storing in the vegetation and helping fight climate change that way. And this is happening faster in the other forests that are not being tended this way. So I am convinced that with the proper care and attention, we can bring old growth forests back to the Vermont landscape. And if we're even more sophisticated in how we do this, and if we use the best available science, we can help those forests to be resilient to these climate changes and adapt to that very uncertain future. Now, the old growth forests of the future might not be the same as the past, but there will be old growth. And my hope, my vision, is that people will have the opportunity to walk into a forest like that and to marvel at the grandeur of those tall, stately trees and that richness and the complexity that you can literally feel as you walk into a forest like that. And if people have the opportunity to sit and reflect a little bit, maybe quietly listening to the forest, and if they can learn to speak the language of an old growth forest, and maybe ask that old forest, "How are you?" Maybe the forest will say, "We're back." Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your story with everybody. That was incredible. So, our next featured speaker is going to be Melody Walker Brook. Melody is an educator, an activist, and an artist. She has been an adjunct professor at both Champlain College and Johnson State College, where she has taught about Native American worldview, spirituality, culture, and history. She's been heavily involved in the Abenaki cultural revitalization movement and done a lot of groundbreaking research for that. She's also a weaver, photographer, beadworker, and ribbon worker. And I also looked at her Facebook profile, and she has a really cute spotted dog. So let's all welcome Melody Walker Brook.
I do. So I originally had a whole bunch of stories planned, and I scrapped it. So because both of you mentioned the emerald ash borer, and I'm going to go off that. So, welcome friends, and I want to welcome you to our homeland, okay? So, this is in Dakana, and this has been our home for 10,000 years, and it'll be our home for another 10,000, so welcome to it. So, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I do a lot of different things. I do traditional tattoos, and I have my awesome dogs, and I work on decolonizing birth. But one of the interesting things, I love history, right? My degrees are all in history, and I've tried to reconstruct our cultural systems, right? So it's not enough to have a seed. You also have to know how to plant it. You have to know why you did your ceremony. You have to know what you said, what you wore, what you did, right? So you have to, it's a whole system. It's not just about a seed. And I like to go to antique shops, okay? And one time I stopped in and I saw this basket. I was like, oh, you know, I don't even like baskets. But I picked up this basket and I did a lot of research on it, and I realized that this was one of our baskets that we made about 1934, right after the beginning of the eugenics movement here in Vermont. And people say that indigenous people here stopped existing after 1790, right? Because convenient that Vermont became a state just after that. So, well, there you go. So we don't exist, so welcome to our homeland. You can have it, right? So, just kidding, I can't. But what this basket taught me, the more I learned, is that we didn't even start doing that type of basketry until about 1820. 30 years after they said we don't exist. So there you go. And I thought that was beautiful because in these baskets, which were made of sweetgrass and ash, and we generally don't use elm, but there are different types of baskets with birch bark, and they were telling our story. I can literally go into almost any antique shop and I can pick one up. And my identity is, our whole history is wrapped up in that, right? So you get from the early period, 1820s, and for me that conjures up images of women who are midwives and bringing babies into this world. Like you look at St. Albans, And the first midwife there that they talk about for the first like 30, 40 years was an Abenaki woman. So we were literally making Vermont what it is in a new way. And we were helping people here. We were still here. We're still doing things. And then you get into like the 1910s, 1920s, and you start getting the sweetgrass baskets, right? People are still here. No one ever stopped being them. And all of these people telling us that we don't exist, I can go into any shop right now, I can pick out a basket, and this is my identity. This is what we know. This is what we do. These are my people, right? And it all ties back to place, because our religion ties to place, okay? If you take me out of this environment, I don't make sense. When Gluskavi transformed this world and Tabeldak made it, Gluskavi sat down in the middle of Lake Champlain, and I can look out every day from Champlain College and I can see my creator. God exists for me here. So when I look at those baskets, I see the struggles of all my people for, centuries. But I also know that one time when I picked up that basket, which was a children's basket, I could see in 1920, women are still teaching their children how to make this, and I know it's going to be okay, because I worry all the time. Are things going to be left for our children? What kind of a world are we leaving to them? And I see these baskets, and I see the sweetgrass. We're going out there and we're harvesting in the swamps, and our traditional relationships with the world around us are still there. We still see beauty in all things. I still see the tree nation as people. I still see the sweetgrass that we're harvesting as a person. And I think that's what we're missing, is that reciprocity. And I feel like Indigenous people can teach others that. And I see it all in baskets. Now what happens when you get the emerald ash borer? And suddenly, there's no more ash trees. And what we worked to create that entire time when people said we had died, what happens when that no longer exists? When I can't take a basket style that my great-grandparents did, and I can't recreate that? What does that do to my identity? Am I still who I say I am? It's really sad to me, because we tried to work with UVM to look at how we can plant some ash trees, and they're like, well, maybe you should wait a couple years. Maybe we should look at the research and see, should we be planting these? What about these bugs? And now I know there's the worms that are coming in that are affecting maple trees. But at the end of the day, our stories of creation, in the beginning, this world was filled with ice. And Gluskavi battled the ice monsters and he pushed them back. This world is always changing. And if we don't take care of it, Mother Nature doesn't need our help. Well, what we're really counting down to is the end of us if we don't shape up. So, go outside and you can look at all those lovely gifts that Mother Nature has pushed back on. Ticks? How many of you like ticks? I'm just wondering. She doesn't really need our help. So she can level us with bugs. But at the end of the day, if we can see the world as a gift again, I think that's when the beauty will come out. And I think that seeing that through Indigenous eyes, and every time you see a basket now, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about 7 generations of my people, from my great-grandparents to my great-grandchildren, all leaving these baskets and finding our home and our heart in the land and the forest, and creating an identity for ourselves out of those things. Because my whole identity is wrapped up in this place. So who are you? What do you want? And who do you serve? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melody, for sharing your story. Before you... Wow, thank you so much. Okay. Also, reminder, our storytellers that we've had so far have been so fantastic, so wonderful, but I want everybody to know that you have a story too. Don't feel intimidated just because our first few storytellers were absolutely amazing. There's an open mic sign-up sheet right here at this front table if you want to sign up. Okay, now for our last featured speaker, we have Michaela Eckler. Michaela is a junior at UVM, majoring in early childhood education. She has performed in over 40 theatrical productions, and she has directed 12. She is 20 years old, everybody. She was born and raised in Fairhaven, Vermont, and she is a true Vermonter because over 4 generations of her family have lived in not just Vermont, but in Fairhaven, Vermont specifically. So, true Vermonter here.
Woodchuck.
She is also one of my closest friends, and she makes exceptional macaroni and cheese. Let's give Michaela a hand, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out. So, yes, I am just a UVM student. I'm not a professor, and so I don't have any great, wonderful wisdom to give you guys. But Michelle was like, hey, do you want to tell some stories? And I said, I can do that. I have gone to the woods, and I can do that. So, I'm just going to tell a couple of short stories that sort of all link together in some way, if you squint, maybe. So yeah. So when Michelle first asked me to do this, I started thinking about what can I talk about? And my first thing that popped in my head was one of my strongest memories of playing in the woods. So down in Fairhaven, in case none of you have ever been there are not a lot of trees and woods unless you go a little bit out of town, which luckily my dad lived just outside of town where he owned, I think it was 5 acres of land, and 3 of those acres were just woods. And so I would go out and sneak away to try to find some quiet space from all of my siblings. And I would go out and I would build little houses out of trees. And so I would find things that have fallen down, and I would collect twigs, and I would build these little huts. And I would call them my fairy houses, and I would leave candy for fairies to come and visit with me. And I would just sit there for hours on end waiting for them to come until my dad would yell, hey, you need to come back inside. And I would go running out, and the next day I would go and I would build another one, hopefully making it better and stronger so that the fairies would come and visit me. And then I got a little older, and apparently I found out fairies don't want to come to my fairy houses. However, I didn't want this tradition to die. And so I have younger siblings that I would share these stories with, and I would tell them that if they built these really strong houses, the fairies would come. And so they would run off into the woods while I was babysitting and play for hours building these little houses. And at night I would sneak out and I would leave them treats from the fairies. And still to this day, they talk about these fairy houses and spending all of this time in the woods. And they now live in Florida, which is very different than Vermont. And they do not have these woods to play in and these places to build these fairy houses anymore. But they still talk about them, and they tell their friends in Florida about how in Vermont there are fairies that you can build houses for, and they'll come and visit you. And I think that that's something that is very special, that they are able to tell these people that have never been to Vermont that these trees and these forests house these magical creatures and these magical powers to them. And so I think that that's really powerful. And whether or not you believe in fairies, which you all should, I think that the forest still has this very peaceful, magical power to them that everybody can find time to go out and feel. So there's story number 1 for everybody. So my next story is a little more recent, and it's a little embarrassing, so feel free to laugh, but if you laugh too much, I will probably cry, so please don't laugh too much, but feel free to laugh. So over the summer, my roommate Michelle here, who's also your lovely host, and my other roommate Maria decided they were going to go hiking. And as you can probably tell, I don't hike, but I was going to be left alone in the house, and so they said, do you want to come hiking? And I was like, nah, I don't really hike. And then like 5 minutes before they were about to leave, I like put on shorts and a shirt and like sneakers, and I was like, I'll go hiking. I don't want to be alone, and I ran out to the car. And so Michelle was telling me, like, don't worry, it's an easy hike. It will be fine. Like, you'll be okay. It might rain a little bit on us, but we should be okay. And I was like, okay, as long as you're telling me it's easy, I got this. And my goal was just make it to the top without dying. That was the goal. So we get to this mountain, which we looked up because we both forgot it's Hunger Mountain. So I don't know if you have ever hiked that, okay? According to Michelle, that's an easy hike. According to Michaela, it is not. It is not an easy hike at all. And so I start hiking up this mountain, and I'm in sneakers, and it starts to rain on us. And not just a nice little drizzle, it starts to downpour. And so not only am I not a hiker, and I am hiking up this mountain, I'm also slipping on every single rock, grabbing onto trees, pulling myself up. And I'm like out of breath, and I'm trying to be like, yeah, this is fun, guys. I'm so happy I came, as I'm dying and crying and just trying to be like, yeah, I'm so glad I came. And Michelle's like, don't worry, it's only like a mile away. Like, don't worry, just keep coming. I was like, okay, and she's like, we'll just reach the waterfall. And I was like, oh, that's a goal. Okay, we'll just reach the waterfall. So I keep hiking, and finally I reach this waterfall, which is just this like beautiful place that like opens up, and you can see all of these trees and this water like coming off of this giant rock. And Michelle and Marie are like, okay, the top is just up there. And I'm like, huh? Okay, I'm just gonna stay here. This is a great spot for me to just stay, and I'm gonna eat a granola bar, and I'm gonna go back to the car. And they're like, if that's what you want. And I was like, yep, that's it. So I sat down on this rock, and I spent, I'm telling a story that you're in. Yeah. And so I sat on this rock, and I ate my lunch that I brought for myself, and it was raining, and so I couldn't bring my phone out, which was awesome, because I just got to sit and listen to the rain hit the leaves of the tree, and listen to the waterfall, and just sit there and get soaking wet and dirty and muddy, and just breathe and catch my breath for a little while. And it was one of the most magical experiences I have ever had. And then I realized I had to go back down the mountain. And this is where it got fun, because now the rocks are very slippery, and I am not wearing hiking boots. And so I start to go down this mountain, and I don't walk down, I slide down, like legitly slide down this mountain, and I'm like grabbing onto trees, like pulling myself back up, and I see these families with like, I saw a 5-year-old, okay, because I asked, a 5-year-old walking down this mountain, like, how was your day? And I'm like, oh great, we're doing great, guys, we got this, don't worry. And he's like, okay, running ahead with his dog, and I'm like, how? What? That's not fair. So I see these families keep passing me, and they're all stopping to check if I'm okay, and I'm like, yeah, I got this. And I look at my watch, and I've been trying to do this for 20 minutes, and they're just at the top of the mountain having a great time, and I still have to make it to the car. And so finally, I make it all the way down, and I'm covered in mud, and I am soaking wet, and the only thing I can think of is I want to have no clothes on right now, and so that I can be not covered in mud. And that's exactly what I do. In the middle of a parking lot, without even hesitating, I strip completely down, and I just sit in the car and I wait. And Marie and Michelle come back down as if nothing has happened, and they are completely fine and not covered in mud. And like, the top is beautiful, and I'm sitting in the car naked and covered in mud. And that was my trip hiking, and I will probably never go again, ever. So thank you. I'll do one more for you, and this one is less of a story and more of just an observation that kind of leads on to thinking about the future of the forest. So as Michelle said, I'm studying early childhood education, and so I get to spend my day with children ages 6 weeks old to 5 years old. And so last summer I got the chance to work with the 3, 4, 5-year-old age group, and our biggest motto in the school is that nature is the third teacher. And that's something that I have tried to think about and use as much as possible. That the world is what the children are learning from, and that it's my job to help them see what's in the world, and not my job to try to recreate it for them in any other way. And so we spent our summers in Centennial Woods up by UVM, if any of you have ever been up there, which I hope you have because it's really fun. And we would spend up to 6 hours just walking around woods that these children have walked since they were 2 years old when they started going to Centennial Woods, that they know better than I will ever know in my lifetime, and I'm 21 years old. And they can lead this whole path and tell me about all of these trees and all of these things, but not what the names of the trees are, but what their spaces are called. And so we have the donkey tree, and we have the ice cream tree, and we have the giant's home where we have to tiptoe by not to wake them up. And if you go to Centennial Woods, I highly doubt you will know where any of these places are, but to these children, this is their childhood. These are their teachers, are these trees that are sort of twisty, and if you look at really closely, sort of does look like an ice cream cone. And if you crawl underneath this bridge and look up, it actually does look like a giant. And I think it's important for all of us to get down on the ground and look at the world as if we are children and try to find those own magical places for us, because I promise you, the woods and the world will look so much more magical. And hopefully you will find the fairies. There we go.
Thank you so much, Michaela. That was wonderful. I loved every second of it. And you're welcome for taking you hiking. I'm really glad that that worked out well for everybody. That is just one of many hiking disaster stories that I have, because I never plan a hike well, apparently. So if you stick around, maybe you'll hear a disaster hiking story from me. But for now, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break, and if you would like to sign up for open mic, please do. You can right over here at this table. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thanks.
A lot of the stories that were told before were super interesting. I don't really have as much of a story. I guess there are story elements to what I'm going to talk about, but it's more observational. Michaela inspired me a lot with what she was talking about, especially her first stories of growing up in Fairhaven and having the sort of contrast between like the Fairhaven area and the main city. Fairhaven's not really much of a city, but it's sort of a cityscape, and then you go outside and you have these forested areas. And it reminded me a lot of Burlington, because as many of you who are here right now in the Burlington realize that there aren't a ton of trees that are present here, but we have the beautiful Centennial Woods, which is just there, and it's sort of just like this own like secluded sort of like nature reserve that we have here. And I think it's super beautiful and super interesting, especially in contrast to the Burlington scene as a whole. And I grew up in Vermont, like Michaela. I can't say that I'm like fourth generational, like true Vermonter status as she is, but I grew up in Georgia, Vermont, which in my hometown, it's mostly just cows and trees, so there isn't much to do other than sit outside and play in the mud or go hiking or whatnot. And those were things that I didn't want to do as a child. And so I spent a lot of my time indoors playing video games, as many young boys do. And so I very much underappreciated the forested place that I lived in. And so, obviously living there, like you have to go outside to like walk to your car or something when mom takes you to school, and like I can look up and be like, oh, there's a tree there. Like I think someone told me a story about one of those once, and I can like relate to it, but I was definitely not as much of an outdoorsy kid. And so it was very interesting to me moving directly into Burlington, because it was sort of one of those things that I ended up taking for granted and not realizing how much I liked, whether it was not necessarily being outdoors, but the serenity that comes with the forest and the forest area. And so you get in Burlington and you get all the hustle and bustle, you have all this traffic, you have all this noise, and it's interesting and it's exciting for me when I first get here, and I'm like, oh, like this is so different and this is so exciting. But living here for 3 years now, it's kind of been like, oh, like there is constant noise here and there is constant traffic and constant people. And it sort of makes me remind myself back to the days where, you know, you could go and sit outside on the porch and see all these trees and see all these birds and hear all these sounds and really appreciate it, maybe not for what it is as an outdoorsy person, for what it is as a sort of like peacefulness of nature. And so one of the things that I found most interesting about Burlington is the Centennial Woods, because you go out into Centennial Woods and it's sort of this whole new environment. And like Michaela said, like some of the people who have lived here, especially these kids, like it's sort of this whole other like magical world for these kids, and they sort of have such like a contrast to this Burlington rural or urban area that it's so interesting to have that contrast there. And so I just sort of wanted to get up here and sort of express my gratitude for Centennial Woods and for the Burlington scene as a whole for really valuing that presence of Centennial Woods and the conservation that we have there, because I think it's such an important thing for us to remember that forests are special places and forests are important for us to maintain, not just for the biodiversity like you had been talking about earlier, but also just for the peace that they allow us to have as people in this ever-growing and urbanizing world. So, thank you.
Thank you, Corey, for that reminder about how much we love forests, even though that's what this whole night is about. But, you know, you've instilled it a little deeper. So next up we have Michelle Lowry. Michelle is also a friend of mine. She lived in the Moth Storytelling Suite in LNL last year in UVM. So she is up on the storytelling game. And also just say that on deck we have Mike Perrin. And so Michelle, her fun fact is that she has mad hitchhiker's thumb, which I guess is when your thumb is like super, super curved. She'll show it to you later. So let's give a hand to Michelle.
Wow, well thank you for that lovely introduction. I was actually going to start by showing off my hitchhiker's thumb, because to this day I've never met someone who can go further than me. No, that seems even about that. No, you're not even in the competition. I'm sorry. No, you're not close. I like to say that I have been hiking since I was in utero, because there are literally pictures in our family photo albums, if you pull them out, nice little colorful 6x4s of my mother and my older sister off in the woods, and my mother's shirt is gigantic. I was a very large baby. But she went hiking, she loves hiking, and she went hiking all throughout her pregnancy with me. I was born in August and she was still hiking around in July, so she was coming it close. But she really instilled that love of hiking and love of nature and love of activity in me. And growing up, I obviously went on a lot of family hikes because of that. And another thing she instilled in me, along with her love of hiking, was preparedness and organization. And that's something I like being known for now. I don't know if I'm necessarily known for it, but I think I am, or at least I should be. So in October 2016, when I came back to our suite that I shared with Michelle and Julia and another friend, Ariel, after a day of grocery shopping, it was around 3 p.m. and they said, "Hey Michelle, do you want to go on a hike? Like, we're gonna go to Mount Hunger, it'll be really chill." And I was like, "Okay, sure, I like hiking." I had my hike, another Mount Hunger disaster story, I know. I want to prelude this by saying, when I was polling the room before and asking, should I tell this disaster story or this disaster story? They said both, so this will be a two-parter, but I will try to keep it short. But the first one is the Mount Hunger disaster story, because who hasn't gone to Mount Hunger with Michelle and had it end badly in some way? I'm sorry. You're famous that way. I'm sorry. We still love you. But And I came back, it was mid-October, maybe late October actually, and it was 3 p.m. And we still thought it was a great idea to go on this 4-hour hike. But I was prepared. I had my hiking boots that I pulled out, I had my fleece that I pulled out, I had my raincoat that I pulled out, I had my liter of water, I had my headlamp, I had my granola, I had my safety whistle, I had my compass. I was ready to go. I put all that stuff in my backpack and got in the car and was like, wow, hiking in Vermont, this is why I came to UVM, how fun! Because no one really hikes in Massachusetts, which is where I'm from. We're the flatland. I know y'all mock us for that, and it's true, it's fair. But so I was finally on my way. We started, we got into the parking lot, it was gravel. I was like, yes, trees, forests, trails, dirt, how wonderful. I'm just really into hiking. Also, I'm very nervous. And, hey, that's great. But so we finally got on our way. And I should mention that up until 2 years ago, I never knew that I was anemic. And if you don't know what that means, it means I have, it's my biggest excuse for everything now, my biggest excuse for not doing anything, basically. Because I have much less iron in my blood than most people, so I have much fewer red blood cells, which carry less oxygen throughout my body, making me get tired really fast. So, when Julia expressed a little concern about, oh, I don't know if this is going to be like too much activity, I was like, nah, girl, trust me. I am not afraid to tell everyone to stop and sit down. Like, I will be sitting every 5 minutes. And that I did. But needless to say, we still made it up in a fair amount of time. However, because we had left so late in the afternoon, by the time we made it to the top of Mount Hunger, it was already getting kind of dim. The sun was going down. And that's when, you know, Mariel and Michelle and I looked at each other as the more experienced hikers of the group and said, okay, we might be in some shit. Oh, can I swear here? I'm sorry. Well, now I have. I apologize. We might be in it. We should start, you know, kind of booking it. So we finished our snacks that we had enjoyed while looking at a beautiful view. Totally recommend Mount Hunger if you haven't hiked it already. It is a fairly easy one, no matter what you say, Michaela. You know, for some of us. And we start kind of trying to pick a pace. And we figured it took us about 2, maybe 2.5 hours to get to the top. Okay, how long do we have until sunset? How long is it going to take to get down? Will we be faster going down? We were not faster going down. And very soon, we found ourselves in the dark. Very dim lighting, trying to hike down all these rocky paths. And then, very soon after that, we found ourselves in pitch blackness. So of course, I'm prepared. I reach into my backpack and I say, I've got my headlamp. And everyone's like, yeah, we don't. So Julia decides to stick with me, the headlamped one, and we kind of separate a little bit from Michelle and Mariel. Michelle and Mariel try to pick their way down the trail in the dark, just letting their eyes adjust and kind of being careful with their stepping. But the thing is, they had to stay a far way away from us if they didn't want the light pollution to kind of mess up their whole system they had going. So at one point, they were probably 100 or 200 feet in front of us, and the only way I could still tell they were even there was Mariel had these tiny reflective strips on the back of her hiking boots. And I remember pitch blackness, an hour and a half, just walking down this mountain continuously thinking, where is the parking lot, where is the parking lot, where is the parking lot, I'm gonna die here, oh my god. Bye Mom, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared enough. And just seeing those tiny flashes of silver in the distance. And being like, okay, they're still there. We're not alone, unless it's some weird fairy thing, because I actually believe in fairies too, Michaela. And I was like, shit, they're trying to kidnap me because fairies are evil. But no, it was still Mariel's boots, because I'm just nutty. And we did eventually make it to the parking lot. And there was a hallelujah moment. It was like, well, lots of a hallelujah, and we're like, oh my god, thank you. Which was definitely my horrifying reaction. But as I said, this is a 2-part story. Which I apologize for, because that would have been a good ending. But the second story is one in which I was still prepared, but it ended much worse. Just this past summer, my mom decided that I needed to have a mother-daughter trip with her. And she'd bring another mother and her daughters as well. It'd be a fun, like, spring get-together in June. You know, we'll go hiking and bond. It'll be great. We'll get away from your dad. It'll be great. So she arranged for her friend Vicki and her two daughters, Erica and Carly, to go on this hike with us up in New Hampshire. And for the love of me, I cannot remember the mountain's name anymore, which I apologize for. I was told to make one up, but I couldn't think of a plausible enough name. So it's the Nameless Mountain now. And my mother and I, of course, were the experienced hikers. We had our water, we had bug spray, we had, if anything, my mother is over-prepared for things. She had like 500 Band-Aids and all the safety wraps and the radio in the backpack in case we like died somehow, which I don't know how we were going to. It was a very popular trail. I mean, I guess considering my past experience, she was adequately prepared because I do seem to have a penchant for death on hiking. But you know. So the problem was Vicki and Erica and Carly were not as experienced hikers. This seems to be a running theme in my life. It was supposed to be a pretty nice day that day. We left early in the morning. I'm sorry if I'm breathing into Cool. We left very early in the morning. It was sunlit. The only concern was there was supposed to be a little bit of rain. We just said, you know what? This is the only day we're going to do it. It'll hold off. And if it doesn't, I guess we'll just drown or something, or die, or slip off the mountain. We'll see. That's exactly what we did. About 2 hours into the hike, we were nearing the top, we were nearing the summit. There were these huge stone paths that were just basically giant boulder faces, completely bare rock, almost a 45-degree or higher angle straight up. I really like scrambling up rocks. I just go on my hands and feet and just book it. Quite enjoyable. I feel like a little mountain goat. Erica and Carly were not so into that. They were not enjoying the little mountain goat experience. They were like, how do we get up here, Michelle? So, you know, I just spent the next half hour going up, and then back down to get Erica, and then up, and then back down to get Carly, and then up, and then back down to get my 50-year-old mother who can't move her knees anymore, and then up, and then back down to get Vicki, and then up again. And as I mentioned, I'm anemic, guys. Like, I hate to use it as an excuse, but I get so tired so fast. And by the time it started drizzling, I was just kind of like done. I was like, guys, I need like a snack. Like, I need you to give me some chocolate or I'm gonna kill you all in a hot second because I'm just so frustrated and so tired and so not happy right now. So I got an M&M. And I moved on and I said, okay, well now I'm just here for the next 3 hours until we get down, and then I'll sit in a pool and just talk to no one. Just leave me alone. That's when it started completely downpouring. And that's when I pulled out my rain jacket, because of course we had our rain jackets. We were prepared, of course. The problem with that was, somehow, the shirt I was wearing was too long for my rain jacket. And I had bare legs with shorts, but the shirt was probably about this length, actually. And it got so heavy when it was wet. Pretty soon I was wearing a dress down to here. And I was walking along trying to not slip on these big stone edifices, just squeezing out my shirt. And little rivers running down me because I'm just trying to squeeze all the water out of it, and it's not working. And thunder started striking. And there were lightning flashes in the sky. And I was finally in a better mood going down this huge stone face of the mountain with my hood up and, my hands in my pockets thinking, okay, this is gonna be fine. I'm getting some energy back. We're gonna be good. And I slip and fall on my butt. And sprained my tailbone really badly. And I did not get up for a solid minute. And at this point, this was a popular trail. There were a lot of families and people around us, and suddenly I had a small crowd around me going, oh my God, are you okay? Are you alive? What's happening to you? Because I had been the one who was just kind of kept going this whole time and seemed pretty resilient, and I was just like, no, just let me sit here. Just give me a minute. They were like, no, can you get up? And I was like, yes, I can, in a minute. Let me sit down. I sat down for a minute, and then for 2 minutes, And then it was still raining, and then I started to feel like a little cartoon character, like sitting in a puddle looking all sad and depressed, because that's kind of what I was at that point. And then Carly and Erica, who I'd have to help get up half of the mountain, who were so miserable, much more miserable than me, they came up to me and said, "Are you okay? Like, do you need any help?" And I was so charmed by these girls who had been having a really crappy time up until that point because they were not enjoying this. And they were asking me, who'd been hauling their butts up the whole mountain this whole way, if I needed help. I was just like, "Yeah, I do. I do need help. Thank you very much." And they got me up off my butt, and we continued on down the mountain together. And they're still very good friends with me to this day because they were very lovely people to hike with. They were miserable, but they did not show it. When I am miserable, I show it. And I respect them a lot for being more resilient than me, who was more experienced.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Michelle. Can I just get a show of hands? Like, who has not been on a disastrous hiking trip? Anybody? Anybody never had something go horribly wrong when they're on a hike? Yeah, I feel like this is the theme of the night. Like, we should all be more prepared or something. I don't know. Okay, so next up we have Mike Perrin, and we have on deck Julia Heffernan. And when I asked everybody to write a fun fact about themselves, Mike just wrote birds. So Mike loves birds. Give us a hand for Mike.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike. I love birds. First off, I've never done anything like this before, so bear with me.
We will not. We will not.
So I want to thank Michelle for holding this event, and I want to thank Corey and the other speakers for bringing up the topic that I'm going to also be talking about today, which is Centennial Woods. I know a lot of us have been there, so hopefully it's a good story. So I'll share with you the story of my morning. Like some of you all, I signed up for some classes. I got blocked out of a few classes and was stressed out about what I was going to be doing in the fall. Knowing that I couldn't do anything about it in the moment, I decided what better thing to do than you probably could have guessed it, go bird watching. So I get up, I roll out of bed after signing up for those classes, and get on a bus and I head up to Centennial Woods. And to my surprise, April 18th, it's snowing very hard this morning. I'm not sure if everyone saw it. So I was walking through the woods, listening to the snowfall, hearing any birds that I could possibly chase after. And I stumbled across a hairy woodpecker drumming on a tree. Hairy woodpecker is very similar to downy woodpecker. For some of you who don't know the difference, a lot of you probably don't know the difference because you're not bird nerds like me. But it's a little bit bigger than a downy woodpecker. So after this spot, I was happy enough to keep on going a little bit. The snow had died down, and I went to go look for more birds. And I heard a really familiar bird call for me. And it goes, "Old Sam Peabody, Peabody, Peabody." If anyone knows this call, it's the white-throated sparrow, and it's a really popular favorite bird for people because of that call. So I get to Centennial Brook in Centennial Woods, and I look at a shrub and I see some movement, and I see a plump little bird singing "Old Sam Peabody, Peabody, Peabody," and that was another good spot this morning. So then I'm moving along, some chickadees start calling out, so I decide to step back and see what happens when I become really quiet. So, to my surprise, the chickadees all start gathering around me, not thinking I'm intrusive, but probably just coming to take a look and see what I was doing. And another smaller bird was in that flock, a golden-crowned kinglet. This is a really fun little bird with a golden patch on its head that kind of looks like a mohawk. And that's another really good spot. I was talking to my ornithology professor, and he said that he hasn't seen one all winter. So I was lucky enough to catch one. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good feeling. So then, still walking through Centennial, and I promise this is getting to not birds. It's gonna get there, I promise. Like I said, bear with me. I come across an Eastern Phoebe, and this is a migrant in Vermont. So they came from down south, probably somewhere in South America or maybe the southern United States, and they're finally back. And that's a bit concerning for me because I look at them and I see the snow, and I know that they're insect eaters. And in the snow, there's not many insects. It's not really warm enough. It's not a conducive environment for reproduction. So, the moral of this story is we've heard a couple stories, or the end of the story is that we've heard a lot of stories tonight, and a lot of them have actually been centered around Centennial Woods. And it really goes to show the impact that conserving natural areas can have on a community like the University of Vermont, UVM student. So it gives me a peace of mind when I'm trying to just mind off about my schedule. It provides a good environment for kids to go learn and explore. And it provides me with excitement and inspiration in my studies dozens and dozens of times, and I know that my memories in Centennial Woods will last forever. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mike, for coming up and sharing your story. Is this your first time storytelling? Your first time storyteller?
Yes.
All right, let's give a hand to Mike. All right, next up we have Julia Heffernan, and on deck is Anna Tosi. Yeah. Okay, so Julia has very bad depth perception. Woohoo! All right, let's give a hand to Julia.
Got it. Alright, so this is going to be like a slightly different story. I'm not that outdoorsy, but I have been outside. So I figured I'd talk about that a little bit. And most of my outdoor stories focus upon the fact that, and this is a shocker, ready? I've never peed outside. So it often causes certain struggles, especially because I have a small bladder. Like, what can I say? So I'm going to take you back to 2016, May 27th. The night after senior prom. Ooh. So to give you a little bit of context, I had a huge crush on this guy. He was a big athlete in the school. He also was a lead in the school musicals. I did the musicals. He was the real life Troy Bolton, and I was trying to be his Gabriella. And I wanted to ask him to prom so bad, but I didn't have the courage. And then, after I had already asked someone, I was talking to him about it, and he says, "Why didn't you ask me? Because I wanted to go with you." Tear. And so in that moment of disappointment, I worked up the courage to ask him to go to the after party with me. And he said yes. So here's my plan. This was going to be my night. This was going to be my moment. We were all camping out in someone's backyard that backed up onto the woods. Tie that theme in. And so the morning before, everyone had pitched tents. I didn't, because I thought it would be easy to pitch a tent at midnight. But it's cool. So I brought a giant family-sized tent, and nobody else was going to bring an air mattress, but I was thinking ahead. I was planning to have a pretty good night, if you know what I mean. So midnight, I'm inflating my giant air mattress as everyone is drinking, having a good time. And I had, of course, decided not to drink because I didn't know most of these people. And you can't really tell the difference between drunk me and normal me. Like, I'm naturally uncoordinated and somewhat nonsensical just in my everyday life. So I was hitting it off with everyone. And then the girl hosting the party, she says, "You guys, my dog's flipping the fuck out. Everyone needs to stop using the bathroom in the house. Everyone pee outside." And so there I was, stuck in my worst nightmare. I was trying to seduce a man with a full bladder. Do you know how hard that is? And I was playing the part perfectly. I had taken down my updo. I had gently tousled hair. I decided to pair it off, offset it with a stupid t-shirt that said legalized marinara on it. How cute. And we were so close. He was being flirtatious. We were rolling around in the grass like weirdos, and it was magical. But I knew my bladder couldn't hold it. He offered to pee out in the woods with me, and I was like, this could be the start of something. But it felt like me at my most vulnerable, I don't want him to see me that way. No pants, just legalized marinara. So I did what any rational, non-peer outsider would. I drove home. And I used the bathroom at my house. And so, of course, half an hour later, when I finally got back to the party, my crush, my lover, was passed out in the lawn. So I slept alone on my full queen-size mattress, perfectly inflated. It was great. And sat and reflected on my thoughts until 7 a.m. when I spontaneously left because I had to pee again. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. A reminder that forests are magical places, but they're not quite magical for everybody all the time. And that is okay. We still love them. Okay, next up we have Anna Tosi, and on deck is Colin Bradley. And Anna, one time she laughed so hard that grapes that were in her mouth came out of her nose. Let's give a hand for Anna.
Okay. I'm a little nervous, but here we go. So, I grew up in Barrie, Vermont, which is near Montpelier, the capital. Kind of woodsy, but not really. You kind of have to travel to get to more like mountains and wooded areas. So, I grew up going to this summer camp. I don't know if anybody's ever heard the DREAM program, but so I was a counselor, kind of like CIT, transitioning to a counselor recently at the summer camp in Fletcher. Fletcher is woods, it's in the middle of nowhere, and Camp Dream is like 51 acres of just rustic woods. There's like no showers, like it's a lot of fun though. And so I kind of just had like the experience like staying in the woods, and like I did a lot of hiking when I grew up, so I just like, I don't know, it's my thing. And this past summer, my best friend Colin, who grew up in North Carolina, a city, doesn't really know much about the woods or hiking. I asked him if he wanted to go hiking up Spruce Mountain, which is like 20 minutes from our house, and he said, yeah, sure. He's like, I don't really hike much, but like, let's do this. So I get in his car, he comes to pick me up, and we like get to Spruce Mountain, we get out of the car, and the kid's wearing Crocs. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting. We'll see how this goes. And so he has like Crocs, he has a tank top on, and like we're doing a sunset hike, so it's probably maybe 4 o'clock at this point. And I'm like, okay, like I hope you're not gonna get cold or fall or anything. And he was like, okay. So we started going up the mountain, and we had to keep taking breaks because he doesn't really hike that often. And he's just like taking a break. All these people are like rushing past us with their dogs and stuff. And so we finally like get halfway, and he like asks the person who's come down the mountain from already being at the top, and he's like, are we there yet? And she's like, honey, you got like another couple miles to go, like we're not there yet. And so we like keep going, we finally get to the top, and we like see the sunset, it's great. Then he has to use the bathroom, and he's like, Anna, I really need to poop. And I'm like, okay, so go. And he was like, I've never like, no, that's not my thing. And he's like, we have no toilet paper. And I was like, hey Colin, there's leaves. And he was like, no, like that's just not me. But so he ends up like taking his pants off, and he's like doing his thing in the woods, and he's like, Anna, I can't find a leaf, like there's no leaves around here. I'm like, Colin, we're in the freaking woods, like how is there no leaves? And so he like goes over, he ends up taking off his like boxers, and uses his boxers, and I'm like, take those with you, because we are leaving no trace in these woods. We like start heading back down, and now it's like getting darker, and we're almost like in the pitch dark. And Colin hates animals. Like nature is not his thing. And so we're like going down. I have my headlamp on. He has his phone camera. He wants to be in front because he's scared, and I'm protecting him from the back from nothing coming. And so we're like going down everything, and oh my god. So we're going, he's like, do you hear anything? Do you hear that? He's all paranoid. And I'm like, no, Colin, I don't hear a single thing. And I was like, just enjoy nature, like relax, you're fine, don't be paranoid. So like we keep going and like just going along. I'm getting tired, like we've been going at this for an hour, and all of a sudden I hear, whoa! And I'm like, what the heck is he screaming about? And so like I look up and he's like, there's a freaking dandelion like in the middle of the trail, and like it just hit me in the face. And I was like, Colin, it's a spider, like relax, dude. And so he like goes around this like big tree, and like we keep going, and then like all of a sudden like this owl is like in the background, and like we hear it, and I'm like, okay, it's just an owl. And he's like, what is that? And I'm like, it's an owl. He goes, no, those are coyotes. And I was like, no, those are not coyotes, Colin, like that's an owl. And he goes, okay, Nature Sally, like I think you know everything, you were at summer camp, but like those are definitely like wolves. And I was like, no, Colin, this is an owl. And so like, we keep going, and like about halfway down the mountain there's like these bear caves, and we start getting near the bear caves, and he's like, oh my god, we're near the bear caves, it's dark, like what if like, you know, Yogi and his family come out? And I'm like, no, they're not gonna come out, like we're fine. And so we start going, and like we hear this noise, and like I don't even know what it was to this day, but it definitely was an animal of some sort. I couldn't tell you which one. And so we keep going down, and like I just think I know Colin's just taking off with his phone and his Crocs, and he's running. And I was like, have a good night. And so like he's just going, and like I'm in the back, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna let him do this. So like he ran for a while, I was by myself, and then he like caught up with me, and he was like, okay, so there was no bear or anything, we're fine. And I was like, yep, I'm still here talking about it, Colin. And so we like finally got down the mountain and got to the car, and he was like, I'm never going hiking with you again, like I don't know how you do this shit. And that's about it.
I love that I'm not the only one who has disastrous hikes. It's the best. Okay, next up we have Colin Bradley, and on deck is Olivia Bowman. Colin, I can't really read his fun fact, but he'll tell us. All right, let's welcome Colin, everybody.
Hello, everybody. That's perfect. Thank you. So my story begins yesterday at around probably like 6:30ish or something. I was here at the Skinny Pancake, and it was pretty awesome. If you get the veggie curry crate, it goes to the Ubuntu Initiative, which helps sexual assault victims in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I saw my friend here, but my other friends were here, and they were like, let's go for a walk. So we went for a walk, and we're walking right over here along the lake, and we see an animal swimming in the water. And I'm like, what is that animal? And it was a beaver. And so I was hanging out with these two women friends that I work with at Retribe. It's like a company. We do like a forest school during the week, and we do like rite of passage stuff for teenagers. And I was like, yo, it's so awesome hanging out with you guys, but like I'm gonna hang out with this beaver like for a long time until I'm like not hanging out with the beaver anymore. So like I'm just gonna let you know that. And they were like, okay. They like took their pictures of the beaver and kind of left, but I just like spent like 30 minutes with the beaver. And because I work as like a nature mentor, so like because basically I was like within 5, like sometimes like from me to that table is where the beaver was. And the beaver, he's going for something. I know it's wrapped around, but I like to like move a little bit when I'm talking about a beaver. So
I'll figure it out. Look, no, look. Look, what I'm doing is untangling it, and then it can go up. Here you go. All right.
Don't worry, I knew what I was doing. So literally, between me and that black thing over there, the beaver, and I'm just like stalked down. And the beaver is just super chill. Like he's, going, so he'll go at like the stalky, gnarly, like kind of coppiced like trees down by the lake that like grow within the rocks. And he's just gnawing on them, like, going at it, and his hands are like alienly strong hands. And he's just, nibbling on the wood. And I'm like, dude, I'm right here. And he like knows I'm right there. And he's just nibbling on his wood. I'm like, this is crazy. Because I don't know if you guys know a lot about beavers, but they're really territorial. So all the times that I've seen beavers in my life I've been in like a river or something, and they just slap the water with their tail as a sign, like, this is my territory, get out of here. Like, this is my home, we don't like you here. They're very like protective and strong in that way. But this beaver, I'm like, he just jumps in the water, moves 5 feet down the lake, comes back up, gets more wood. And so I just spent 30 minutes with this beaver, and it's really great. And so then I get a call, I have to leave the beaver, and whatever, I'm sad. And then I got a call to sub at this school called Crow's Path. It's a nature school at Rock Point, right near Burlington High School. It's really cool, like kids who go to public school can take a day off of public school and go to Crow's Path, which is like an all-day kind of like nature school. I do that with Retribe in Richmond, but I don't really work at the one in Burlington, except I do today, because I was subbing. And it was really great, and so I like show up, I'm like, oh my god, okay, I'm really tired. And I show up and they're like, all right, Colin, your job is to like tell a story right in the beginning circle. And I have this like little beaver piece of wood that I had got, from the beaver, like that I chewed really nicely. So I told the story about the beaver. I was like, you can't guess what animal I was like 10 feet away from. And like, even like Teague, who's like a college UVM professor, was like naming off every single animal, but he didn't guess beaver. And so it was pretty cool. But then Emily and I did this, our guild that we did. I thought I would just tell you guys about it because it's pretty dynamic and interesting. So basically our guild is like a group activity that we're doing, and what we choose to do is like kind of a village imaginary guild. So basically what we said is, if you want to sign up for our guild, we're going to be a village, we're going to trade things. It's going to be pretty cool. And so we probably got like 8 kids. And so we were standing in a circle, we're like, who are we? Like, what village are we? And we decided that we were basically like animal, like shapeshifter, like hybrids. And that basically wolf or coyote was like our call, and he was like our kind of like father spirit. But like I was beaver, so I had like this like gnarled like stick. I'm like, oh yeah, so I just eat wood and I just carve wood all day. So if we need weapons, I can carve them. And then the really smart kid was like Black Bear, and he would just be like really like solemn, and then he would just start thrashing and like running through the forest. The 2 girls were workout otters, so they led workout classes. So they were like, yeah, like we have a whole workout course over here, because otters are athletic, and that was pretty cool. And we had a couple of octopi, which is really weird. And I was like, yeah, we don't have water. We're just like that. Yeah, so I couldn't. So basically, then we started trading. And I paid the girls 5 acorns to learn how to do a running class. But then I was like, I can't, I'm a beaver. I don't even know how to walk, really. So how can I pay for this running class with the 5 acorns? But then, Squeaky, the other medicine otter, she was like a medicine woman otter that like would just like bring you like weird hemlock potions. Just be like, drink this, you'll get better, or something. And I was like, well, I don't know how to walk really, so maybe this will help me walk. So she gave me a potion that made me walk. So then I was like, all right, I can pay the girls to help me run. And they were like, okay, you go 1, and you raise your left arm and leg, and then 2, like this. Boom, 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 boom. And so then, and it's funny because there's an old Abenaki story about raccoon, and raccoon in like the old Abenaki stories used to have long legs, so he used to look more like Coyote. And so I was like, okay, I learned how to walk. Now I just paid all these 5 full acorns to learn how to run. So I just like, once I got fired up, I just like kept running. So I just like started running all over the forest. And like, everyone's like, what is going on? Beaver's running everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, I'm running. Like, I can't stop running. And I made my way over to like where it was really marshy. And then I was like, oh my God, I forgot how to swim. Like, you know, I can't swim. And they were like, oh, Beaver can't swim. And then I like, the little kid Raccoon, his name's actually Coconut, like his real name that they call him. He is kind of like Rabid, but no, he was Rabid later. But then he gave me some snow. I learned how to